Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast, produced by Una, a group purchasing organization that empowers sourcing heroes, and Art of Procurement, the world's largest procurement podcast network. I'm your host, Kelly Barner. The goal of the Sourcing Hero podcast is to capture the epic stories of people who are rising up and beating the odds to create exceptional value within procurement, directly from those heroes themselves. Today, my guest here on the Sourcing Hero podcast is Vytas Sliesoraitis. Vytas is a career procurement professional with experience in companies like Intel, Google, Epic Games, and Gilead Sciences. That said, it's actually the time he has spent away from the office that has taught him the true value of time, and which we're going to focus on today. So hi, Vytas, thank you so much for being with me today.
No, thank you, Kelly. It's great to be here, and hi, everybody.
So I shared some of the companies that you worked at, but that is such a small fraction, right, of the journey you've been on professionally. What do you think it's helpful for people to know about your experience up to this point?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a little bit about my background, as you mentioned, been mostly spending my time in tech between Intel, Google, Epic Games, but made a change for the past 2 years working at Gilead Sciences on biopharma, which has been great. So I think what would be helpful for people to know about me is like identify, in my case, I think when I'm connecting with a new leader and trying to explain about procurement, what we can offer, is to showcase kind of your superpowers, right? So I think in my case, based on my experience, has been first, be the connector between the business and procurement, right? Understand what they're trying to do and their objectives, and then how procurement can be an enabler, as opposed to come with a fixed agenda. Okay, this is what we're gonna do. So that it has been, again, successful and helpful for me in my career. That's the first superpower. Second is don't shy away from doing meaningful and transformative work. These will be hard things and not easy, but it's the most rewarding experience you can have, right? Personally for yourself and your team, as well as your stakeholders. So that's something that has been guiding me throughout my career, fixing something, a category, an area that has not been where it needed to be, or transforming then to the next level. So that's the second superpower. And then the third one is like you cannot do it alone. So what I learned to do is wear different hats between being, again, a manager for your team, but also a coach and a mentor, right? Yeah. So that's going to enable your team to be successful towards a journey with you. So those are, again, the three things to keep in mind as you reflect on your career. And this is what made a difference on mine so far. Yeah.
You know, a couple of years ago, you actually decided to take a sabbatical from work. This may be a terrifying concept to some people, just the idea of stepping away. What led you to make that choice?
Yeah, so I was at Epic Games at the time. And so we got to a point there where I needed to make a choice, right? And take a decision that would be impacting my long-term career objectives as well as my family in terms of relocation. So I decided to part ways from Epic, right? So at that point, the sabbatical idea did not come to mind right away. Part of me was like, all right, great. I left Epic now. Let me brush off here my network and start to reach out to people, and then let me find my next job as soon as possible. But then I took a step back, Kelly, and I was like, look, it's the art of possible, right? I was thinking, no, what if? I love this question, right? For many different circumstances. What if I were to take some time, right? To really think through what I want to do next. So I had a discussion with my family, with my wife. Primarily, I have two daughters, teenagers in high school. And so I discussed with them the possibility of me like taking some time, off to decide what I want to do next. To your point, right away was like, look, but what will happen with how are we going to be paying the bills, right? And then, right, and what do you mean taking some time off? But then, like, look, we have a plan. Yes, we're going to need to make some adjustments here, but it's important, right? I've been working at that point. I was working for, have been working for almost 20 years. So I was like, I kind of earned it. Some time for me to step back and then reflect, decide what I want to do next. So that's when the sabbatical idea came to fruition. And again, based on some reflection and then aligning with my family, making certain adjustments. and then determined that was something that would be extremely helpful for me at that point. So that's how it came to fruition. Yeah.
Now, I hadn't thought about this before, but I have to observe that part of the credit for the success of all this goes to your daughters, because there are a lot of teenage girls out there that would be a reason to take a job to get out of the house. So your daughters
Yes.
must be lovely that you were willing to stay home and take
Yeah.
sabbatical with them being there. So it, like you said, the family situation does have to be right.
Yes. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And look, it has been interesting, right? The past, I would say, now almost 5 years since the pandemic, because in a sense, most of us were working remotely from
Yeah.
home, right, during 2020 and 2021, those 2 years. And then a lot of the companies, remain flexible for people to work remotely. So in a sense, we were closer to our family, but
True.
right, physically at least. But if you think about it, right, at least in my experience, we worked longer than before by being at home. We're connected like 24/7, and we were like completely attached to projects and programs and work. So in a sense, I feel, at least in my case, I kind of got a little further away from my family, including my wife and my daughters. So it was great for me to be like, look, I'll have some more time. We can maybe do some things that I haven't been able to do before, right? And simple things, very important, like go to a swim meet. They're both swimmers. They will play water polo, and they take a Monday afternoon and go to, my wife who live here in the Bay Area, right, in the Silicon Valley, like go to Santa Cruz, right, to the beach and watch the sunset, right?
Yeah.
Or take a longer weekend, right, once in a while, and I don't have to be back in the office on Monday. So all those things, I think, will enable me to have like a better quality time with my
Mm.
family, if you will, including my daughters, to your point, right? Which has been, huge in terms of, again, ROI, if you will,
Oh,
to be,
absolutely.
on the sabbatical. So yeah, before.
So you went from working years and years and years, and then certainly having those
Yes.
hours expand, as you said, as we all worked remotely from home during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Then you made the decision to stop and step away. All of a sudden, you must have been staring at this calendar that was wide open. How did you mentally or organizationally go through the process of deciding how you wanted to use that time so that it didn't sort of slip away from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what I learned, right, during those months was to be more intentional with the
Mm,
use of the time you have, right? The first thing you realize, like, time is a gift. And when we are busy at work and in life, I think we take for granted a little bit the time, right? We just go from one thing to the next, and then you blink, and then like 5 years went by or more. During the first weeks, to your point, I was a little lost. I'm like, okay, what do I do? Right? What do you mean I don't need to
and what
go
day
into a
is it?
meeting, or right? What day is it? Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And then what I decided was like, no, let me be intentional. I want to remain connected, right, with
Mm,
some individuals in my network. And then I start again. I took a 30,000 feet view. I'm like, okay, what would be most helpful for me now with this time? So I decide to, as I mentioned before, dedicate some more time to my family, participating in activities with my kids, spending more quality time with my wife. And then on the professional side, I'm like, what if I were, going back to the question, what if I were to get like a coach, a professional coach on which I can connect? On my case, I had a coach for an hour every other week,
sure.
so that we could talk about, look, what I want to do next, right? And some self-discover and determine some things that would be helpful. And then the third piece on professionally was do some professional development training. In this case, was from Wharton. That's the one I decided to do remotely, which was great to be connected with people, etc. So the first piece was like coordinating the family agenda to be more present. Second, having not a ton, but a few things on the agenda, right? Having the discipline to like, look, for instance, networking, I will make the goal to connect with one person this week for a coffee,
Okay.
lunch, or video conference call, whatever the case may be. So that was the second. And that's one of the goals I had. And then on the personal side, Kelly, I also, again, having the gift of time. I was at the time, I still do triathlons. So my two passions outside of work, surfing. And I grew up, again, a beach town in Brazil. I'm originally from Brazil, from São Paulo. And then the second that I developed when I moved here to the US, I've been here for 15 years, but for the past 5 years, I've been doing triathlons. And one of the greatest distances is called the Ironman, right? Where you swim for 3.2 kilometers, then you bike for like 112 miles, and then you run a marathon at the end. So you need time to train, right? That's the key thing. And so because I had that time, I'm like, look, let me make the investment to train for an Ironman. So I was able to then take that time to prepare myself, and I finally did an Ironman here in Sacramento in October 2022. So, which was great. Again, this is how I used, my time and coordinated my agenda on these three, key areas, and then being intentional with how I was going to use my time.
Well, you clearly survived the Ironman because you're here. That is a huge accomplishment in and of itself, making it to the finish line, still kicking in this world. And I do, it's interesting because I think to be a very serious athlete, you have to truly know yourself. You have to know mentally how to stay focused. You have to know your body's strengths and weaknesses, because everybody has like slightly different things that they can and can't do. But I also imagine that making the choice to take the sabbatical, making the choice to be purposeful and to balance out your time the way you talked about, you must have also learned some things about yourself through the sabbatical experience. What are some things that you took away? Certainly gratitude, right, for the ways that you chose to allocate your time. But what were some of the things you maybe learned about yourself in going through that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what I think as you go through that journey, right, your earlier question, the initial weeks or a few weeks when you are into the sabbatical, there's a lot of thoughts in your mind. Some of them are more positive and constructive, but others not so much, right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of question a little bit yourself and the choices. And so I think as you take a step back and kind of take a bird's eye view, you kind of see your career, right, and your life to that point. And then I think to your point there, Kelly, first I think you develop a sentiment of gratitude, right, for what you've been able to achieve. And then you acknowledge where you have had setbacks and maybe where things did not work out as you planned. But then you can see like, look, what was in my case at least, what was the lesson learned there? And how do I came back and jump back into the horse, if you were to continue the journey there? So I think what I learned about myself was the resilience, right? Like how I have been able to manage my career, my life at that point. And then to my opening mark, you kind of see, look, what are some of the patterns in terms of what strengths did I demonstrated in those situations, right? Where myself and my team and the organization was successful delivering a project, developing a program, etc. So I was able to, again, learn more about my strengths and acknowledge and recognize those patterns where I was able to leverage those to be successful. And then probably the third piece there was just enable me some grace, right? I think, at least myself, I think you mentioned about the athlete mindset. And when you're training for a sport and something, sometimes you overtrain or you are too hard on yourself, like, oh my gosh, I need to catch up on the train. I'm behind on the running volume or swim or bike or, whatever it is. And then you want to catch up. But what happens if you go over, right? If you want to go too quick, you injure yourself, right? And then you need to take a step back, recover, and all those aspects. So by being more graceful, like, look, when things did not, work the way I planned, there was a learning attached to that. And it's okay. Like I would not get everything right 100% of the time. And it's okay. So I think you kind of learn to be more graceful when you are in this, a crisis or a high stake moment, and maybe you are not at your best for any given reason. So that was the other key learning of me as part of reflection and be more reflective towards that period of the sabbatical. Yeah.
When the time came, was it hard to go back to work?
It was a mix of emotions. In the first, so I was away right from the office, if you will, for about 8 or so months. And I adapted to a different routine. So when I came back, I was extremely happy to, again, be back in the market, right, if you will, and doing something that I choose to do. At the end, I was lucky and successful to have 2 offers, and I ended up deciding to Gilead Sciences. So it's something that I wanted to do. It's a new space in biopharma. I was excited, about it. And but when you start, right, like it's that routine. We know the drill. It's like it's again going through the meetings, and there's a learning curve, a ramp that I need to go through. It's a new company, new team, etc. And then it's very interesting because from time to time, I connect from people that decide to take the same journey, or they left their jobs, they're trying to figure out what they're going to be doing next. And I tell them, look, things will be okay. Like, cheer those moments, right? Time is a gift. Enjoy the time you have with your family, for yourself, for your connections. Because when you are back to work, soon enough, you will cherish and remember those. So part of me was extremely happy to be there. Part of me was like, oh, I wish I had the time to, again, do this or do the train or whatever it was that I was doing before, right? So I think you become more intentional and more mindful about the time that you have, right? And how to balance. I think in my personal trajectory, as I explained before, during the pandemic, I think I pended too much the work side, and I left the personal and family kind of, I needed to balance that better. So I learned how to do this more efficiently and be aware, right? So that was the key learning there. Yeah.
So you found then that in addition to certainly appreciating the time that you had, it's perhaps changed your mindset, even though now you're back. Your approach to work is maybe a little bit different than it was before you took the sabbatical, either in your approach to scheduling, hitting that pendulum swing balance that you talked about. Do you feel different every day about going to work now than maybe you did before the sabbatical?
I do. I think, again, maybe I have less of an autopilot mode as it comes to choosing what project I'm going to be doing next, and building my agenda, all the key objectives for the quarter or the year. So I think what changed the sabbatical, being mindful of the time, is like, look, what if we were to, again, there's 10 things, maybe the initial list, but what if we were to cut this in half and do 5, really well, as opposed to do all those 10 things that we have in our radar here. So I think enabled me to be more intentional about the goals I set for myself and my team, and what we need to, we want to focus on, right? So I think on this case, realization, again, like less is more as it comes to the impact you can generate, right, in the role that you are at. And it doesn't mean for you to turn all the projects, down and like, no, I can't do that, and be very rigid. But it's like, negotiate that, explain to your stakeholders or your leadership, look, we will need to make some trade-offs, right? We cannot say yes to everything. We'll need to postpone or change the timeline for this other, project or initiative, so that we can focus on this one here. And this is the why behind it. So I think that's how it changed for me going back to the sabbatical. Yeah.
Now I'm going to be very interested to hear what you have to say to this next question. And Vytas, this is a question that is, well, truthfully, it's a pair, but this is a tradition. We do this with everybody the first time they join me here on the Sourcing Hero.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you 2 questions. You can pick either one. There are no wrong answers. Either what does the idea of a sourcing hero mean to you, or what do you think heroism looks like in a business context?
I think I'll choose maybe the second one, heroism look like in the business context. And this goes back to what I mentioned in the beginning, my opening there, the superpowers, etc. At least for me, it's like, don't shy away from the big transformative projects or initiatives or opportunities per se, right? Take the initiative to tackle that. You may not have all the resources you need right away. You may not have yourself all the knowledge to be able to tackle that, but take the initiative, bring up, propose to your leadership what you want to do, assemble a team or group of people that can help you, or collectively, right, to tackle that initiative. I think the learning and the reward you're going to be getting towards the journey will justify all those risks, right? That you are taking by maybe exposing yourself in the first place, right? And standing up your hand to want to tackle something that hasn't been done before, or people are too afraid to try. So I think that's what the heroism in the business context would look like, and be vulnerable to tell folks you don't have all the answers. The stars are not aligned. They don't have everything figured out, and it's okay. Just be authentic. Again, assemble your team, complement with people that are better, and then certain aspects to enable the initiative to be successful, and go for it. So this is what my idea of heroism in the business context would be, Kelly. Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate hearing your story. As I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking, okay, how do I get more purposeful with my day? How do I make better decisions about my day so that I'm not, as Philip Dyson would say, always running around like a chicken with my head cut off? I think it sounds really appealing, and yet I recognize that it's deceptively hard to achieve the kind of balance that you've sort of worked through. If people are meeting you and hearing your story for the first time through this podcast, what would be the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
Sure. So it's primarily on LinkedIn. I don't have any other social network, and I don't know if you call LinkedIn a social network. Maybe it's a professional network that become a little bit more social, but yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. I think you have my name there on the description of the podcast, and feel free to reach out. I'm happy to connect and spend more time. That's the main thing.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast. Join us again next time for more true stories of sourcing and business heroism performed by your colleagues and peers. Look for the Sourcing Hero wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe. Finally, don't forget, sourcing heroism is taking place all around us every day. Keep your eyes open and you're bound to see it. Until next time, I'm your host, Kelly Barner. Stay well, and always remember that you can be a hero too.